This episode of From Angel to Exit is brought to you by the CEO's Right Hand. The CEO's Right Hand provides customized outsourced finance, accounting, and human resource services tailored to small and medium-sized businesses. Their services include fractional CFO, HR support, capital raising, and financial infrastructure development. They emphasize personalized engagements and expert support to drive growth and operational efficiencies. If you want to find out more, visit theceosrighthand.co. Are you serious about planning a successful business exit? From Angel to Exit is your go-to resource. Subscribe to our newsletter at eckfeldt.com/podcast for even more valuable insights. And to get personalized guidance, take our free exit readiness assessment. It's just 24 questions, and it will give you a clear picture of your exit readiness. Find the assessment at eckfeldt.com/exit. Submit your results, and we'll schedule a free follow-up call to discuss your specific situation and the best way to maximize your valuation and ensure a successful transaction. Now, back to the episode. Welcome, everyone. This is From Angel to Exit. I'm Bruce Eckfeldt. I'm your host. Our guest today, Aaron Levenstadt. He is an exited entrepreneur. We're going to hear about his story and the company Pedestal Search and the growth and exit story that he has, and then what he's doing today. Aaron's working with a lot of entrepreneurs on that journey and that process, and I'm excited to talk about that and seeing how his exit kind of set him up and also kind of taught him a bunch of things that he's now applying. So excited for the conversation, excited to learn a little bit more. With all that, Aaron, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Bruce. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure. Before we dig into the company and kind of the growth and the exit story, we'd love to get a little background, I guess, kind of professionally or, from an education point of view. Like, what was the story before this? Did you always want to be an entrepreneur? Was this like your destiny when you were in kindergarten? You said that you want to scale and sell a business, or what was the backstory?
Yeah, first day of kindergarten. Yeah. No, so the backstory is I did my undergrad at Stanford. So I was out at Stanford, and this was sort of, I started my undergrad, I guess it was this was earlier internet days. Mm-hmm. And I joined a group when I finished undergrad at Google that was really responsible for the core search products. So that at that time it was paid and natural search. Mm-hmm. And I was on these product core teams working on those products. And so from my educational experience through to that experience of working on these products at Google, I felt, very fortunate in the sense that at a young age, very early in my career, I got this sort of front seat onto how this is going to change kind of so much of how we live and do business and interact with each other. And then the story goes from there. So I'm getting exposure to this stuff professionally growing up at Google.
Yeah.
And then I had a few friends that were kind of like, hey, like, oh, you're working at Google. Would you mind sort of taking a look at how we're doing search? Mm-hmm. So I was happy to do that and was just able to like sit down and give advice wherever I thought I could be helpful. And in one of those meetings, it was actually to a large like national eye care brand. Okay. We went through their Google Ads account, and I remember thinking they were like, they were spending, I don't know, like 6 figures or more a year on like search terms that were geared towards animals, like, dogs and cats. And I was kind of like in the meeting, I'm like, do you guys like operate on animals? And And they're like, well, no, like this is not a veterinary clinic. I'm like, okay, do you guys know that you're spending like 6-ish more figures a year on advertising to people that are looking for like dog cataracts? Yeah. And I realized there was, a really interesting opportunity in the space because there was just so complicated and challenging for business, and rightfully so, for businesses to get their heads wrapped around this stuff. And that was really the beginning of what became Pedestal Search, which was our firm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And when did you kind of make the leap or know that, hey, look, I really want to focus on building this company rather than continuing my kind of employment at Google or other ventures? Like, when did you go all in?
Yeah, so I was at Google for a good while, and then I had left Google and was then helping some of these businesses with this stuff while I attended law school. So I went to law school, never practiced a day in my life, but and not to say that was a bad experience, or I mean, I have tons of friends who are in the legal profession, they love it. So nothing to do with that, it just wasn't for me in terms of practice. And while I was in law school, I was working with businesses, helping them figure this out. So that was really like kind of the beginning. And then, when I finished law school, and I basically elected not to practice law and instead to start really building the firm that was going to help focus around helping businesses really nail it on their search marketing initiatives.
Yeah. And where did you feel like you really knew what you were doing in terms of building a company, and where did you feel like, oh my gosh, I have no clue what I'm doing on this part of the company?
Especially early on, but over the course of time, I think I felt like that a lot. There were many points in time where I was like, oh man, what am I doing here? I have no idea how to figure this out. But in terms of like some specific instances.
Yeah.
So I think going through the process, first of all, just like fully wrapping my head around the finances, around just how a business operates and lives and breathes, and some of the things that I think folks can take for granted on that front about, cash flow as it's different from a P&L, as it's different from accounting earnings, the way that numbers flow through the business, and really getting a very good handle on that. Yeah. That took me more than a minute to figure out. So that's one. The other is sales. And I mean the actual language and the way that a sales conversation runs. And this is still a conversation I have with agency owners, many times a week, with how they're actually running their pitches, their sales conversations with buyers. That took me a while to figure out, and I think the gap for me there was really understanding the difference between how I was putting something out into the world and how a buyer, from the buyer's perspective, call it like buyer psychology, is absorbing that. So as I studied this more and more, and I went further down this rabbit hole, I became just fascinated with psychology, and I've read so much on psychology and how this psychology works, specifically buyer psychology in these kind of constructs. Yeah. And then in applying that learning to actually running our sales process and structuring the conversations, I kind of quip on this, from like, your sales conversation should almost feel like a landing page. And it's, you say this, like, it's very structured, way more than I initially thought, and way more than a lot of folks I speak to today kind of feel it should be. I think there's this idea that, I kind of understand a little bit about them. I'll kind of like feel out the conversation. We'll have like a good chat. We'll see if there's like something to do together. But I found that was very inefficient, if not just wrong, in the sense that like you really have to, understand who the buyer is, understand what you're selling, understand their problems. They don't even have to articulate it. Understand, and then you have a way of structuring this. And I created a bit of call like a framework around this, which I kind of like call like the 3 W's. So you have to be able to identify, you have to understand specifically, why the buyer is speaking with you, right? So why they're getting on the call, and you should know that before the call starts. Yep. The second W is like kind of like why this situation, you have to help them understand, if they don't already understand it, why it's like Game of Thrones, winter is coming. Like they don't figure this out with you or somebody else like you, or they are going to have a big problem. And then the third thing is, why you, and this is something that needs to be put on the table, ideally by you, they shouldn't have to ask that. Yeah. They shouldn't have to ask like, why are you the right fit, or why are you the right provider? It's something that you get on the table and you explain, and actually kind of like interesting nuance around that, which I learned, and why you is really not about capabilities. Why you is about why, if this doesn't work out as between your firm and the buyer's firm, it's bad for everybody. And you have to articulate that so the buyer understands it's mutually assured destruction.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got risk and potential pain as part of this deal just as much as you do.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Versus my capabilities. Go ahead. Yeah.
So, as you kind of grew the company, I guess, what were some of the inflection points for you as a leader? As the company grew, like, where did you kind of shift focus and kind of put your energy into? Like, what did you notice as the company grew?
So early on in the company's growth, we would take on a number of different kinds of work. So we were search driven and search focused from our early days, coming from my experience having worked on the algorithms at Google.
Yeah.
But we would also take on different kinds of projects and web dev and Facebook marketing and Instagram story ads and a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
And I learned along the way that was a mistake. Mm-hmm. And it's actually a quick little backstory on this. Is I was in like a community, like an EO group, and I was talking with somebody in the EO group, another guy in like my round table, and great guy. This is the nicest guy, and we would chat regularly. And I was kind of positioning this to him as like, here's where we're at with the firm, and we're thinking about different growth levers. And he was one of the people who kind of offered this idea of like, well, why don't you just open this up and start doing X, Y, Z, A, B, C. And I think the advice was very well intentioned, but this person, my colleague on the board, he was coming from an e-commerce, like his business is e-commerce, and I think in e-commerce that advice that advice can work in certain businesses, and I think it can work in e-commerce because if you're running, I don't know, a bike e-com business and you want to like create a SKU for helmets and you already have manufacturing and you pop it on the website. That makes a lot of sense, but in the agency world, adding another offering is effectively running another business.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
You got to staff it. You got to have KPIs around it, performance metrics around your team, and it's a whole other animal. So, adding these creating these other lines was effectively creating a bunch of other businesses, and then what we ended up doing over time was, we pared all that back and we catonified the offering in the sense of, this one offering, and we really only focused on helping clients get better discovered as productively as possible on search.
Yeah. Was there even a type of client that you focused on, or a type of client situation?
So, we had a number of different verticals. So the vertical was not specific. It wasn't as if we just worked in this one industry, but there was certainly a client, like an ideal profile, so to speak, in the sense that the client would typically be mid-market. So they weren't too small that this felt like all like so novel and like they were, you're questioning every keystroke. And then they also weren't so enterprise level where it took 18 phone calls and 12 emails to get anything approved. So we worked in what we call the sort of magic mid-market firm. And they had typically gotten to a point where they had been working with search, had either felt that they were spending so much on paid and had to figure out a way to supplement that with an organic growth lever, or they had already had some success with organic and really wanted to figure out a way to level that up, and they wanted to bring on support to do that. So those were two very good client profiles that we kind of honed it on.
Yeah. I guess at one point, did you feel like you had something that was scalable and that was going to be potentially big? Like when did you kind of go from, I've got this scrappy startup, to I've got a real company here that has some real potential?
So I think it was we got to the point where, so we're kind of doing that's more general level stuff, right? And then we evolved through this like catonifying we're just going to be doing the search element of this stuff, and that became woven into all of our language, which is, I think, a big part of this. So the idea of, how you communicate with clients, both before and after they are a client. So pre-client in the sale, and then post-client once they're working with the firm. We would say things, and we get clients who are like, hey, you guys are already handling our Google ads. Can you also, handle our TikTok and our Facebook? And when we're happy to pay you guys for that, right? So, but the answer to that is no. And I think getting more and more comfortable with, hey, listen, the same way that I'm not going to accept your money for me to play ping pong for you or shoot pool for you. Like, I won't, those aren't my core competencies, right? Like, I mean, nobody would want to watch me play ping pong for free, but it's another story for another day. But the idea is like, you as the firm, we grew and grew, and I think to answer your question, we grew a lot more as not only was the offering made a lot more specific and more clear and productized to a certain degree, but also when the language, and as everybody in the firm is using the same language of like, when we're asked to do other things, we don't do them, and we say no to them, and we explain that there are great people that can do those things. It's just not what we do. And we would say things like, like what I just said, where like, if you ask us to do those things, we won't do right by you. But the search stuff that we do, we are and are going to continue nailing that. We're going to hit that out of the park. That is what we do best. And that's all that, we dial in on for you with the client. So that was, I think, as we got more comfortable with that transition and with the language that we used in these ongoing conversations with clients, it became clear. And then the productization piece of it. So I remember one piece of advice I got from, and this is great advice from somebody who it was a prominent business person, and we sat down and talked about a bunch of different things. And one of the things that he had said was, as in this business, in the tech-enabled agency, we had some tech behind what we did. It's like, what you guys got to figure out to do as close as you can to doing this is, without losing personalization, is how do you sell tickets to a movie instead of shoot the movie again and again for every viewer. Yeah. So as that philosophically, kind of like as that went through my mind, and then we started doing that in the firm. It was like, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. And it's going to be a little different for this firm versus that firm. And we're going to need to obviously change the Google ads or change the content. But the fabric of the way that we do it, the rubric is consistent. You're not shooting the movie scene is you're running the same storyline, right? The same Hollywood line. It's just,
we may put different costumes on, and we may, it may be in
not
black and white.
Yeah, exactly right. So I think as we kind of embrace that philosophically, and then in the actual production of the output of the firm's output, that was a point where I really kind of started noticing like this is really taking off and has serious legs, and if we just continue to dial in and focus, we're going to get to a great, going to continue hit goal after goal, and eventually to the sale. Yeah.
Any big inflection points on the growth process, like crux moments or things that you need to make big decisions, or you needed to kind of restructure things, or leadership issues? Like I always find there's interesting stories in the growth process.
Growth or through the transaction?
On the growth side, before we get to transaction.
On the growth side. Yeah, I think. So, I think so much of this is also, the language, again, I'll just go back to that because I think it's underrated, just how you speak both internally and externally within your firm. So we would get, pushback, and even when some AI stuff started coming out and clients would ask us, like, oh, well, in our world it was like, I don't know, SEM Rush or SEO Tool X has this like AI thing, and do we really need to be doing this? And some of the implications of that was when we start to get pushback either in the pitch or in regular work and account management. I think getting very clear on how to manage those points of the client conversation where the client is, in a way questioning, like, what's the value at the table.
Yep.
And I remember somebody explained this to me, and it stuck with me, and then kind of became part of our conversational narratives, was, the kind of the idea of, like, if I were to hand you a manual and maybe some tools that would try to sort of like teach you how to fly a Boeing 747, on your desk and at your computer, like, are you planning on jumping into a cockpit and flying the plane, right? I mean, the answer is, it's just rhetorical, right? Like, nobody would do.
I hope not.
Say it again.
I hope not. I hope they don't jump into a plane.
So exactly right. So, but and then similarly, yeah, like, okay, there's been tools that have been doing this stuff for decades, whether it's some Ahrefs or SEMrush in this world, or ChatGPT in a different context. But unless you have people that are strategically guiding these initiatives, right? That's where the rubber hits the road. It's not, by pushing this button you get some output in the data you're looking at. So what do you do with that stuff, right? What do you do with the data out of these things and the outputs from them? So I think as we went through that growth, as we were growing and we started to get pushback as our client base grew and grew, and our clients came from all different parts of the world, even less warm, i.e. like less first, second degree connections, third, fourth degree. We don't know these people. We've never, they're only there because they found us in an ad or referral or whatever. I think really continuing to articulate and figuring out ways to articulate the value, that would have been one. The other would have been really getting access to great advisory. So putting people around me that have done this. So I mentioned earlier, like my friend on the e-commerce owner, and again, great person, but surrounding yourself with people that have done this kind of thing. Yeah. The other thing that we figured out, which I'll hone in on here, is we figured out a really great way to continue to generate leads and to keep leads very warm by what we called awakening sleeping leads. Okay. So in our business, and I think this is probably comparable with many businesses of all different shapes and sizes, is you interact with people, whether it's through an online form or through a conversation, and it doesn't always lead to business. In fact, more often than not, it doesn't, right? You gotta, and then how do you follow up with those people with some scale, but at the same time keeping those messages very personalized, so they're clearly not just on an email nurture that everybody gets the update. When we figured out how to do that, which we now help firms with that are trying to figure that out with systems to do that, when we figured out how to do that, that was a huge unlock. So the idea of, and it's interesting how it unlocks, which we can talk about, but the idea that you have these you have people that are interested in working with you. Yep. Don't lead to business right away.
Yeah, timing's off. Yeah.
Sorry?
The timing's off.
Timing's off. Budget doesn't get approved for 6 months. Just, we love you guys, but give us 6 months. Yeah. And then they forget, and you forget. Right? That's right. And then you forget too.
Yeah, exactly.
So this idea, and you don't have to hit that person back with like, hey, has the budget been approved yet? Hey, are you guys ready to work with us? There's a way of having a very personalized but structured, methodical cadence of outreach. Continued warm touch points. Yeah. And that was systematizing that was a massive unlock, because the return on that investment, both capital that we used to develop the system and then time and actually using that, second to none. Game changer.
Yeah. Cool. And at which point did you feel, did the idea of an exit really start to come to fruition? Like when did you start thinking, okay, like I need to start thinking about exiting. I need to kind of put a time frame to it. I need to start focusing on kind of tasks and activities directed towards that kind of transaction. Like how did that play out for you?
So as we got closer to COVID, and then through COVID, we started getting more and more inbound interest. So I would get LinkedIn messages and other kind of messages from folks that were like, hey, have you thought about selling the business, or have you had any
Yeah.
thoughts about potentially partnering around the business? And most of them I would largely ignore, or get on like a quick conversation and realize that this was not a real buyer, or real in all bunch of different senses. But I did take, at one point I ended up taking a call, and I don't remember why I took that particular call. Maybe I
It was
had
a Tuesday. I
it
had a
was
good breakfast.
Tuesday. I just had a coffee. I had an opening in my calendar and whatever, and got on a call, and it was an interesting conversation. And when we started to talk about what the deal could look like, it was close, but not quite at where I would have liked it to be. So I did end up kind of telling them politely to be like, hey, listen, like, let's keep in contact, but kind of like for now, like kind of like kick rocks and let's revisit. And then I think maybe 3 to 6 months later, they got back in contact, and we're kind of like, hey, we can now offer this, we can now offer that. And a bunch of things that we had talked about earlier on. And that kind of started to be the point where I started to think about it more seriously. But that also in conjunction with some things that I had a decent sense of what I wanted to do if I wasn't going to be running the firm. So like in my case, I wanted to figure out a situation where I could invest in other firms, and I have investments in firms where I invest in digital agencies and help them with their growth.
Got it.
As a strategic investor. And then I also wanted to support entrepreneurs, through a couple of different other initiatives. One is community, which I'm just passionate about communities, and being involved in them. And then also through this sort of lead gen, the warm outreach, reawaken sleeping leads software, which was so valuable in my firm. And I was thinking about ways I could help others with that. So I had these different ideas for what I could be doing after this.
Yeah.
So I think it was as those ideas were percolating and this deal started getting closer and closer to where I was looking for a deal to be, that's when things started melding and really taking shape.
Yeah. I love the idea that there was, it was a push and a pull, right? Like you were, thinking about how, kind of wrapping up your involvement with the current business. Like, I'm ready for a change. Like, I see there's some opportunity. I would love to get some chips off the table. But also this idea of there's something pulling me forward. There's other things I want to do that I want to sort of set myself up to be successful in. I guess where did you see, in terms of the things that you envision doing next, how did that shape your approach to the deal or the deal itself in terms of terms, timing, the structure, right? Like what you retained out of the deal. Like how did that kind of influence how you were going to approach this?
Yeah, so it was influential in the sense that, I did have other interests, and I had been working on this for, I guess it was probably 11, 12 years at that point in time.
Yeah.
Not that that's that long. People work on their businesses for a lot longer. That's all good. But I think for me, I was kind of, as I wanted to explore other areas professionally, and then as the deal started to take shape over time, I did not want any kind of conventional earnout, and I was clear about that at the top of the conversations with our eventual acquirer. So we were able to structure a situation where there was a monetary piece of the deal that was paid over time, which helped them because they were funding the deal with some equity, and there were like bank covenants around like when cash could be outlaid. So that was kind of a win for them in the sense that they weren't having to put that out, or they couldn't have put that out based on their covenants. Yeah. And then on my end, it was okay. Well, it's just a time marker. It's just a timestamp as to when those payments will be made. Yeah. And Aaron isn't tied to them, so that was a big piece of that. There was no contingency on Aaron, but and for some for your listeners, I think part of the reason why our acquirer was okay with that was because we had done things along the way, like everything in our firm was SOP, like had standard operating procedures around. Like we had other people that were involved in selling at that point. Like it wasn't just Aaron. So I think that because we had those systems and those key pieces in place, they were comfortable with that in sort of seeing Aaron as not like a key man risk, so to speak.
Yeah. What, anything that you didn't get right? Anything that, was an issue in terms of either valuation or terms that was contentious or you had to kind of work out or compensate for? I mean, what was any hair to the deal?
Yeah. He didn't get right. I think that we were on a. I mean, you can only do this in hindsight, right? So like now I'm like, Monday morning quarterbacking this conversation.
Yeah.
But I think a couple of
Tuesday afternoon quarterbacking here.
Yeah, exactly. Tuesday afternoon quarterbacking. So I think that one, we were on a hockey stick level of growth while the transaction was underway, which was we were just growing very quickly for some of the reasons that we've already talked about.
Yeah.
And I mean, very happy with how everything worked out, but I think we actually ended up retrading on the original LOI. But I think we could have been even more aggressive on that in hindsight. And there's this idea, like there's a frame around the deal where like only the acquirer can execute a retrade of a deal, right? Which I think, I was fortunate in that I'm like, well, and the retrade happens typically when companies are dropping during the deal, and the acquirer is going to say, well, listen, like the terms don't make sense anymore.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we ran that and said, well, now it's doing, for anybody who's not on the screen watching this, like it's going up and to the right. So we're going to need a different deal, which is effectively retrading the deal.
Yeah.
And they
but to
did
your advantage.
retrade it. They did move the marker, but I think we could have been even more aggressive along that line. Now, in hindsight, the other thing that was contentious, and I'd urge everybody to think about this, who's going to go through this process, is the non-compete.
Yeah.
So it got worked out, and I didn't feel like it was overly onerous, but they pushed hard on that, and I did, and I think the deal kind of almost fell apart around it, where we're like, all right, like I don't know if we're going to be able to meet on this, and I don't think we ended up speaking for like 2 weeks after that conversation, and then we finally regrouped and it was figured out, but we got kind of needed like a break. But the non-compete,
Cooling off
and I think it's
period,
something
we call
that,
it.
Sorry?
Cooling off period, we call it, in negotiation terms.
Exactly right. Cooling off period. And I think that is, I think those kinds of things, so an earnout, like what you want to be doing after, how that aligns with their objectives, or, how they want to be running the business, that needs to be thought through.
Yeah.
And I mean, I would also urge you to, as you're early on in the thinking around this, is think about them and their business structure and how, like, maybe they really need you to stick around because they don't have operators, or they're not an operational entity, and maybe that's going to work for you, or maybe it's not. But you got to think about that and think about from their vantage point.
Yeah.
The other thing, and then the non-compete. So thinking about how comfortable you are with the non-compete that's being offered, and what you'd like, and those are two. I'll also share one other piece of advice on this, because I think it's just it's counterintuitive.
Okay.
So when we first started getting into conversations with this acquirer, I don't mean like in the first or second, you've met them, prior to an LOI, but kind of, I think this period is called like management meetings, which is just like we're having more serious conversations and potentially some other people are involved.
Yeah.
But in one of those meetings, so I got in this advice from a again, people that have done this exact journey that are agency owners that scaled and sold firms. So one of those people I tapped as I was going through this, and this advice was so counterintuitive to me, but was so helpful. And the advice was, when you are sitting in that management meeting, when the conversations are now beyond preliminary, you should list off, almost like, Dave Letterman top 10, the reasons why they should not buy your business.
Yeah.
And
I love it.
I remember hearing that advice and being like, wouldn't it make sense for me to explain like why they should buy the business? Right? If we're in this, and that is kind of, again, like the construct and the frame around this is, and this advice, which was, again, spot on, was no, don't do that.
Yeah.
Sit in, not that you should not talk about any of the great parts about your business. That's fine. But you should also tell them, hey, listen, like, here are the 7 or 10 things about this business that if I were in your shoes, I would want to understand and think about, so that everybody's on the same page moving forward before we start all investing more time and energy into this. And I'll tell you the benefits of this. So it did a couple of things. One is it set the table for, like, I want to be very open and upfront with you on all the reasons why, if I'm a buyer, I may not want to buy this kind of business, and that one builds a lot of trust because you are pro offering that information before it's even asked, and you're telling them, hey, like, here's the skeletons in the closet before you even have to open the closet door. The other reason why it's really powerful, which I didn't realize until much later on in the process, and I certainly didn't appreciate it when I brought it up in that meeting, is when we started getting into due diligence, which is a long, less than fun process where kind of everything that you've ever written, every contract is being tabled, and anyways, everything's being poured over. So we got into due diligence, and there was a part of due diligence which is called the quality of earnings. Basically, the earnings are being evaluated and looked at, and where the cash is flowing. And one of the things that I talked about in that top 7 or top 10 list, the item that I flagged for them was some contracts we have, they don't auto renew, and every single November, I think it was November, like, they cancel the contract and then it renews in February when their budgets renew. So there's this drop that then kind of a couple months later gets picked back up. So the accountant or the lawyer on their end who is going through the QOE sends this email like, oh, like, everybody's on it, 17 people on it, being like, oh, we're noticing that, in November there's this big drop off, and then, and he doesn't CC the 2 people that I had met with initially. So I see this email come in, and people are like, there's 17 questions that have been asked about it, and I just add the 2 people that I spoke to originally, and I was like, hey, Doug and Dan, this was number 7 of the reasons that we talked about in our third conversation. We've already dealt with this. And then they write back being like, oh, guys, this has already been dealt with. Move on. So it was very helpful to do that in ways that I did not appreciate. And I think it is really powerful in terms of that kind of initiative early in the process.
Yeah, I call it the caveat emptor conversation. Right? It's like, you want to have that up front early because, I mean, it 2 things. As you mentioned, it gets all the things on the table so that now you build trust. But it's interesting too, because this whole kind of psychology thing is, when you start to try to convince them not buy the company, it triggers this competitive thing in them where, like, no, like we want, like, don't tell me what I can buy and not buy. I want to buy this thing. So it's it's kind of a head game, but
100%. That's a good
part
point.
of the process. I know we're coming up on time here, but I want to hear. So you did the deal. I guess maybe one thing specifically about the deal. Look, you've mentioned this tool or this reawakening kind of cold lead kind of thing. Like, was that a piece of technology that you specifically had to carve out, or how did you handle that? Because I've seen situations where founders get in trouble because they want to take some IP or clients or something, and like if they don't carve it out specifically as part of the deal, it can get a little dicey. Was that something that was part of the negotiation?
That was not, yeah. So what we were doing with that stuff had no bearing. There was no part of the deal that incorporated that.
Got it. So that was separate sort of technology that you could carry with you, or know-how and stuff that you could transfer outside the sale.
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. And so tell us what you're doing now. So you had a nice exit. You had these visions of things that you wanted to do next. How has that played out?
It's been great, and it's been a lot of fun. And I'm getting to invest in these firms where I feel like I can add a lot of value, in firms that are looking for strategic growth capital. I'm able to help provide that through what's effectively my family office. So I'm providing that growth capital. Supporting those firms as they're gearing up in their journeys, and as they're continuing to grow, and supporting that growth. So that's one, which has been a very enjoyable and an interesting endeavor. And the other is a community of agency owners that are interested in learning from one another and from people that have scaled and sold. And so we bring in different people that have scaled and sold and expose them to the community. And that's been really fun. And then the third thing is this specific system around and software around reawakening sleeping leads, and just have a very personalized, easy, efficient, personalized way to tap these people on the regular, which they then turn into business.
Yeah, excellent. And if people want to get more information on you, any one of these ventures that you've got going on, what's the best way to get that information?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. I believe I'm the only Aaron Levenstadt, so that's an easy way to find me. Another way is you can shoot me an email. It's Aaron at Join Agency Alliance. So just those three words all together, joinagencyalliance.com, and then the website's there too. So those are the best ways to get a hold.
Perfect. I'll make sure that all that information is in the show notes so people can get that. Aaron, thank you so much for taking the time today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Bruce. It's been a lot of fun.